Hello, it's Martin from Wisely Automotive, and as you can probably see, I'm not in my office, but in a hotel room. No, we are not changing to a new kind of videos, but I am in Scotland, in Livingston, just by Edinburgh, and I'm picking up a BMW i3 and I need to drive it back to London, ideally in some reasonable time. So I thought it would be a great opportunity to show you how to use a car which doesn't necessarily have 200 or 300 miles of range on a fairly long journey. Firstly, let's answer the question whether you need to do any planning. Personally, I've done pretty much the same journey in my 60 Ah fully electric i3 when I was moving from Glasgow to London for the Wisely job. But for completeness, I will show you how to plan your route if you have never done so before. So let me get my iPad and I can show you how to make your life a little bit easier. There are multiple apps available. The most popular one in the UK is definitely ZapMap. ZapMap basically congregates all the charging stations in a single app. However, if you are trying to manually pick out which ones to stop at along your journey, it would very quickly turn into a nightmare, and there are many kind of tips to look out for. There is a built-in route planner, so if I tap Add New Route Plan, I can select starting location, which is Livingston, and my destination is Wisely Automotive on Raymouth Road. You've got more journey options just like in Google Maps. If I continue, I can see on the map it's taking me along the expected journey towards Glasgow on the M8 and then by Sheffield. 425 miles as expected. Confirm. Here I just need to make sure that I select the 120 Ah i3 as my car. So 120 Ah auto, save, and everything should update. It says that the realistic EV range is about 179 miles. The best resource we use for EV range is the EV database, and from our experience that's very close to what you actually get in different driving conditions. 180 miles is way too optimistic, and especially in this colder weather with motorway driving, I would say 140 at most. And routing mode for now, let me leave in auto route, but I will show you a little trick later on. I am assuming that I have 100% state of charge at the beginning of my journey. I will see whether that's actually the case, but I hope the auction house put the car on charge. 20% on arrival is quite a good margin, but I only want to charge to 85% at each charging stop. The reason being that the i3 has a very flat charging curve all the way to about 85% in case of the one with the biggest battery pack. But then the charging speed really falls off sharply, so I want to make sure that I stay within the range where it charges really fast. This in fact makes the i3 a very good beginner EV for long journeys, because you don't really have to arrive with super low state of charge to get the maximum charging speed. The car pretty much stays locked at 125 amps of charging current all the way up to 85%. As the battery pack voltage increases, the charging speed slightly increases, but you're always at about 45 kilowatts. And then only it starts throttling beyond that point. If all of what I just said made zero sense to you, I would recommend watching one of our previous videos. I will leave it linked up in the card above, which explains all of the electric vehicle terminology and charging speeds, etc. But anyways, let's get back to the route planner. Everything else left on default, and let's move to the next step. Here you can see that the route planner picked out a couple of chargers. So the first charging stop is at St. Nicholas's Gate, 93 miles to get to that one, and it's expecting that I will arrive with 34% left. Next one is a pot point at Lidl, then one by Sheffield, and lastly Cambridge Services. Now this is great, but what if you want to tweak the plan a little bit? And that's where I go back to the previous step with all the options, and instead of auto route, I click on Suggest Chargers and let the system recalculate everything. Now what it does is that it displays clusters of chargers around the area where it estimates that I will need to charge, but I can pick out the ones I want to use. So for example, I know that Gretna Green is a very good location because there is a GridServe charger, but in case that's occupied, there is also an Ionity at the same services. So let me pick that. It's estimating that I will arrive with 42% state of charge, but it's quite cold outside, so realistically I think it will be a little bit less. And when I click add to route, then it brings me onto the next leg and I can do the same thing again. So Scotch Corner is a very good location around there. Add to route. Next up, around Sheffield, we've got again motorway services. And lastly, Peterborough services also looks like a lovely option. There we go. And that should get me to London. Worst case scenario, I can always stop up around Cambridge or just before entering London. Excellent, so that's my route planned. I can save that and I can reference it back later. I think now you see the number one reason why I did this manually is so I can pick the chargers and charging providers I like. Now that the units have been upgraded, we have had quite good experience with GridSurf. InstaVolt is definitely high up on the list, and so is Osprey. Ionity obviously quite a reliable option, but can be quite pricey. And I would say only really makes sense if your EV can really utilize the 350 kilowatt charging rate. In case all of this is not nerdy enough for you, the app to go with is ABRP, which stands for A Better Route Planner. It's an amazing app. It can be a bit overwhelming at first, but the good news is that most of the planning can be done automatically by the app and you don't have to think about it. The nice thing is that if you really want to drill down, it gives you a lot more options on which exact charging stations to avoid, and it can still do automatic route planning, charging station providers, whether you have any membership cards, etc. I think honestly ABRP deserves a separate video and we will probably do that. Let us know in the comments what exactly you would see and what your questions are when planning long journeys, and we can address those in the next one. But yeah, if you see now, it gives me a slightly different route plan with more but shorter charging stops. But as I said, given I know the route, I may not strictly speaking stick to any of these plans, but I will explain all of that once I'm on the road. So with that said, enough of talking and let's go. So I've collected the car, had a good look around. There are a couple of tiny hairline scratches which don't seem to be through the paint, so those should polish out no problem. Otherwise it's a very nice example. Unfortunately a bit dusty, but underneath all the filth there is a lovely car because there doesn't seem to be any damage whatsoever, so it's pretty much going to be like a brand new car. In terms of specification, it's very close to standard. With the facelift we've got the full LED headlights, the diamond cut wheels as standard, and because it's a fairly new car, it also gets the CarPlay integration. Before I get started with CarPlay though, let me set up the My BMW app. It's not really essential, but we like to do it just so we have the car in our account and it's removed from the previous owner's account. And also means that as I charge along the way, I can monitor the progress from my app and I don't have to be sitting inside the car. In case you don't know how to do it, it's fairly simple. I will leave a card to a video tutorial just going through everything step by step, but basically you just need to copy the VIN number, enter it in the app, and then confirm through the iDrive system. Excellent, that's sorted, and as you can see we are at about 85% state of charge, 138 miles of predicted range. Now that figure we often refer to as the GOM or the guessometer because it's not very accurate. But what you can do, so for example when I look up Gretna Green GridSurf, this is where the app comes in handy as well, because I can share the destination into the BMW SatNav right through the My BMW app. So yeah, send to my BMW. And if I go into my connected drive messages, it should pop up right here. Excellent, yeah, GridSurf. And I don't have to worry about typing it in manually.
Please follow the arrow on the display. When leaving, please go straight on.
And now that the route has been calculated in the built-in navigation system, the range estimate should be a bit more accurate based on the topography of the route, the speed limits and so on. I also like to set up my nav with the split screen, and in the perspective view, just so I know where I'm going. I will also get the CarPlay set up. It's wireless CarPlay, but I will be plugged in probably for the most of the journey anyways, just to keep my phone topped up. But yeah, that is indeed correct. Pair. But it seems that the car runs an older version of the software, because regardless of what I do, I always get the kind of split screen CarPlay. Yeah, but this is something I can explore later on when I get back. The last things I need to do are resetting all the trip computers, just so I can give you accurate information about everything. Reset the trip computer in the instrument cluster, which is independent. And I know that in the UK all of you like miles per kilowatt hour, so that's the units I will use. Ready to go. It's about 11:22. I will just set up the camera, so let's say that I'm leaving at 11:30 and state of charge 85%. Let's catch up at Gretna Green. I'm at Gretna Green, and exactly what I expected to happen happened. First I tried GridServe, but there are only 2 units so far. Even though they have multiple connectors, the parallel charging has not been enabled yet. And with 2 cars charging there, it means that I would have to queue. To avoid that situation, I am splurging for Ionity. I arrived at the right time, because even when I was approaching the services, I saw that the chargers were totally empty, but now we are totally full. So I'm joined by a Porsche Taycan, a Kia EV6 and a Mustang Mach-E. I know you will say that Ionity is too expensive, and yes, that's true, but generally speaking the chargers are very reliable. And if you do a lot of mileage and you get some kind of a subscription plan, then the prices do come down drastically. So if you have one of those newer cars which can take advantage of the high charging speeds, it really does make sense. I arrived with about 25%. It was a very efficient journey because there was a lot of traffic, a couple of traffic jams. So I didn't quite manage to stick to 70 miles per hour all the time. Even though it started at about 8 degrees Celsius in the morning, now we are up to 16, 17 and sunny, dry conditions. I've been here for about 22 minutes and I'm already at 63%. Even if you hate Ionity with passion, their app is really good. Because for a car like the i3, which doesn't really show you any charging information, the Ionity app gives you readouts of the energy delivered, the current charging power, how long I've been here, and the total price. From the moment I arrived, the car pretty much jumped to about 45 kilowatt and is still maintaining 47 kilowatt at 66%. I returned from the bathroom and the car got to about 85%, and as expected at about 87%. That's when it reached the peak charging power of 50 kilowatt, started tapering off. Now I'm at 90% and down to 35 kilowatts. So time to go and on to the next leg to Scotch Corner. If I get the directions in Google Maps, yeah, it's about 80 miles from here. The GOM is saying 165, almost 94%. So yeah, no reason to stay any longer. The only thing is, I will share this to the car again and off I go. Yes, and you see that the range estimate has dropped by a couple of miles to take into account that we are driving on higher speed roads and motorways, but still have more than enough. No reason to hog the charger for any longer. I literally did not have any time at Scotch Corner services. When I turned up, a Nissan Leaf very conveniently just left, so I did not have to wait at all. Plugged in, got my food, stayed for about 30 minutes and charged again to about 88%, where the charging power starts tapering off anyways. And I already moved away from the charger because there was an EQC waiting to charge. Car is currently estimating 154 miles of range left. At this point I am undecided on which charger to use. I don't want to stop too soon and want to cover at least 100 miles, but on the other hand I have some work stuff to do which can't wait too long. So this is how I decide. I've looked at my next charging stop and I think I will go for this one. It's at Markham Moor. It's an Instavolt. They have been a very reliable network, but this is one of the newer units. So we will see how that goes. And if we look at the distance, it's 94 miles away and they still should have a very comfortable margin at the bottom. Here we go, nice and quick. That's it, no time to waste, ready to go. Okay, charging stop number 3, I believe. The Instavolt is working very well, started on first try. It took a while to ramp up, but I think that's just by design, and then stabilized at about 45 kilowatts. I plugged in with about 33% in the battery, still no one besides me. In the meantime, I stuffed my face with ice cream, got some coffee, published one of our videos, and while I was doing all of that, the car is almost fully charged. So I need to think about how that affects my journey plan, because with how efficient the drive has been so far, the car is estimating almost 200 miles on a full charge. So let's look at ZapMap. Bulldog Services is about 100 miles away, so I only can do a quick top up and then get all the way to our office in London. And again, yeah, it's a great option because I've got both Ionity and GridServe. So if GridServe is available, I can use that. Otherwise, the company finances will need to survive Ionity. So rinse and repeat, send to my BMW. By the way, important note, it seems that the BMW app seems to lag behind a little bit, especially when charging quite fast. So it's important to keep that in mind if you want to move really fast. But anyways, yes, so we are down to about 2 kilowatts. Car on, BMW iMessages. Left. 99%. GOM has just readjusted just like before, but we have plenty of range. So yeah, it should be only a quick top up and then should be able to get all the way to London. Last charging stop at Baldock Services. I arrived with about a third of the battery left. The car was saying 44 miles remaining, so literally just a quick top up for a safe margin. I updated Arthur and Emma on how I'm getting on with the journey, went to the bathroom, so the car has been plugged in for about 15 minutes and I'm already well past 50%. So let me just put the destination into the sat-nav and I will try using the quick search feature. There it is, 48 Weymouth Road. Don't need to worry about congestion charge because it's quite late. It's about 9 p.m. I will get to London. Realistically, it will probably be an hour. So the congestion charge zone is no longer in effect. It did get cold outside, so it's good that I'm getting a quick top up just so I can travel in comfort. Just for the record, I've been using default comfort mode for the entire journey and air conditioning was set to roughly about 20 degrees Celsius. But it was the kind of weather where, yes, it's a bit colder outside than you want the interior, but it was very sunny, so I think it was the AC running and not the heater. Anyways, enough waffling, I want to get home. 64% now, so unplug and ready to go. And that's the end of the journey. I've officially arrived. If you want the total stats, the average energy efficiency was 3.9 miles per kilowatt hour, which, considering it's mostly a motorway journey, is absolutely fantastic, but obviously helped by the quite nice weather. Driving time 8 hours and 19 minutes. I left at 11:24. I realistically arrived at about 10:30. I was just moving the car around and taking some photos. But anyway, I will give a full summary tomorrow with all the numbers and the total cost of the trip. The last charge definitely could have been shorter because I arrived with just over a quarter of a battery and 54 miles left. I'm still not used to seeing that kind of a figure at 26%. If I go outside, the person cleaning the car will definitely have a lot of fun because the windscreen, the bonnet and the front bumper especially are absolutely covered in dead bugs. But as I said, nerdy stats to follow. So a new day, different car, but I've written some data down so we can go through it now. As mentioned, I arrived with about 27% left in the battery. The total distance was 435 miles, which took 8 hours and 14 minutes of driving time to cover. That works out to 54.1 miles per hour on average, and I needed roughly 111.5 kilowatt hours based on the efficiency of 3.9 miles per kilowatt hour. The total cost for the trip, if you assumed home charging at 30p per kilowatt hour to get the battery up to 86%, came to just under £60. And this is where you can see the difference between home charging and public charging, especially at motorway services and on Ionity, because if I only used electricity from home at 30p per kilowatt hour, which is supposedly the current average UK price, but if you drive an EV and you get the nightly tariff, you would definitely do a bit better than that. The total price to cover the same 435 miles at 3.9 miles per kilowatt hour would work out to just under £34, so pretty much half of what I paid. The second usual question when it comes to long distance travel in electric cars is how long did it take? As mentioned throughout the video, I made 4 charging stops, first one being 43 minutes, next one 36 minutes long, then 55 and 20 minutes. That brings the total to 154 minutes of charging time, which is very close to what ABET route planner estimated in the most balanced setting. However, had I not needed to stop so early on the third leg where I needed to publish a video, I could have stretched it to Grantham, where I would have completed a regular 40-minute charge instead of charging way too long to 99% at my stop, and it also would have meant that I could have driven straight back to London without the additional charging stop I had to make. What I'm trying to say that if I only cared about the total journey time and tried to be as quick as possible, I could have made 3 40-minute charging stops. First at Gretna Green, second at Scotch Corner, third at Grantham, which would have made the total charging time 120 minutes, saving me about half an hour in total. And that brings me on to the last point, which is comparison to a diesel vehicle. You have to keep in mind the i3 is not really designed to be a highway cruiser, but it still managed fine. Cost-wise, for the same £60 I used in electricity on the trip, a diesel vehicle would need to achieve 54.4 miles per gallon at £1.65 per litre of diesel. This is honestly quite realistic, especially for a Super Mini. It may not necessarily have 170 horsepower, but in terms of efficiency it may do even a bit more than that. Had I been a bit more clever with the charging and only used GridSurf, which is priced at 39p per kilowatt hour, it would have been £43.5 to cover the entire journey, which means purely based on the cost, equivalent to a 75 mile per gallon diesel vehicle. And I think that's about it. I hope I answered all of the usual questions. If you have any more, leave them in the comments. But what I hope this shows is that you don't need a long-distance electric car if you need to drive to Scotland, for example, only a couple of times a year. And if you pick the right one, even the older generation EVs do just fine. So, with that said, thank you very much for watching and see you in the next video.